Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode, number 130 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. And today we're going to talk about establishing a virtual bench for your business, even if you want to remain solo. It's going to be an important topic for you to understand and start implementing if you haven't already. And so that's what we're focused on here today. Before we get started, I'd love to share a business update with you, which also may be just another mini podcast within a podcast. But last week, if I recall correctly, I shared with you that I was going on an offsite. I had scheduled an offsite type of an event for myself, and I was headed out. Now I'm back, and it was amazing. And I just want to tell you how highly I recommend doing this and give you a little bit of the story behind it. So in the past, on a past episode last year, we'll put the link in the show notes, I talked about scheduling a corporate retreat. That corporate retreat was more geared toward celebrating successes, just taking a moment to really, spend some time appreciating what you've accomplished and reflecting on that, and maybe even thinking ahead, to the next year, but not really with a necessarily an intention in mind other than taking that time to really celebrate and do things that are rejuvenating. In this case, what I did for the last 4 days is to have an offsite. I have a little bit of a break in our family calendar at the moment. And so I decided to take advantage of that and book this time over at a hotel. This is 10 minutes away. Nothing outrageously amazing, just like a super new hotel with its own kitchen and kind of living room area and hot tub and that sort of thing. And so anyway, I booked this hotel with the purpose of it being an offsite where I had time to myself without interruptions from my family. I love them, but it's good to have time away also. So anyway, I booked this 4 days and had a very specific goal in mind of completing the draft of a really big project that I've been working on. And I got so much done. I got so much done without sort of feeling like I was having to switch contexts back and forth. I was able to really focus in on this big project and making progress against it. I worked mostly in the hotel room. Sometimes I would go out to the outdoor patio that was, in the lobby. I would go to the roof deck restaurant that was there and just, work outside. And sometimes I even worked in the hotel hot tub. This is a kind of a side tip, but I would go in the hot tub when no one was in, there. And then I would record some of the work that I was doing on the Otter app. It's OTTER.ai if you've never used it. And it just does transcriptions. That was amazing. Just kind of sitting in the hot tub, recording things, and then going back to the hotel room, downloading the transcript and making progress in that way. So anyway, the point here is being able to, whether it's 4 days or 5 days or 1 day, whatever it is for you, being able to schedule an offsite like this where you're able to have that space to think, where you're not interrupted, where you're not having to context switch, and really giving yourself that space is an incredible way to run your independent consulting business. And a lot of times we don't really consider this type of thing because we're used to our employer paying for us to travel, our employer paying for us to have an offsite. And so we don't really think about doing that for ourselves and what the return on investment would be. But I can tell you the return on investment for me in terms of the amount of work that I got done toward this project and the quality of thinking that I got done, and also just the headspace and the quality of it was very much worth it. So, highly recommend that. Think about doing an offsite for yourself when you're at the place where you need space to think, which is probably more often than not. So, with that, let's now dive into today's topic, which is building a virtual bench for yourself, even if you're solo. I want to reiterate here, and I will probably do it a few more times in this episode, why this is an important strategy. This virtual bench is an important strategy for you, regardless of whether you're solo and really have no interest in involving team members, or whether you want to build a micro agency or boutique firm or even, a mid-size type of a firm. Regardless of what your goals are or what you have right now, this virtual bench is really important. And I'll share with you here in a moment why that is. Probably an obvious reason and a more surprising reason. That's why I named this episode The Surprising Reason to Build a Virtual Talent Bench. Okay, so let's dive into today's agenda and then we will get to all of that, to get to that surprise. So, the agenda, we are going to first just get on the same page. What is a virtual talent bench? Then we will talk about why to build a virtual talent bench, including that surprising reason. And then I'll walk you through the 5 components to build out your virtual talent bench. And we'll end up with the steps to get started with this virtual bench strategy for your independent consulting business. Before we get to agenda item number 1, what is a virtual talent bench? I want to recommend a companion resource for this episode. Go take the independent consultant's scalability assessment. You may have already done this, or you may have heard me talking about it and haven't yet gotten around to doing it. Either way, I highly recommend that you go take that independent consultant's scalability assessment. It will give you a report on, where are you progressing as it relates to growing your business and setting yourself up to scale. And it will help you to prioritize those opportunities of, areas of opportunity. So it will help you to see, what this area is going really well. You've set it up in a way that is optimal, and it will help you to see other areas of opportunity that you have in order to grow your business, in order to scale your business so that you are making more money without having to work more hours. And that fits in really with this virtual bench strategy that we're going to be talking about today. So let's start with what is a virtual talent bench, just to get on the same page about the definition here. Essentially, a virtual talent bench is informal relationships that you have with individuals that have skills that are complementary and or overlapping to yours, where you could pull in that type of talent on an as needed basis. Doesn't mean that you need to hire them, doesn't even mean that you need to subcontract with them, doesn't mean that you need to oversee them. There are a lot of different models, and we'll talk about some of those here in a minute, but it's essentially you having informal relationships. So these are not even contractual relationships or partnerships or anything like that. It's informal relationships with individuals that have skills that are complementary, so supporting of or tangential to, or even overlapping to your own skill set. The virtual talent bench also includes informal relationships with companies. So not just individuals, but also companies that provide services that are complementary and or overlapping to yours. So the purpose of this virtual talent bench is for you to have these informal relationships so that you can reach out to this talent when your clients or potential clients need a certain skill set that either is complementary to what you do or somehow overlaps to what you do. So it's having this kind of bank of resources that you can call upon when you need to in different scenarios that you'll come upon with your business as you're running it and generating leads and selling and that kind of thing. So, loosely defined, that is what the virtual bench is. And we're going to talk more about the scenarios where you would call upon the virtual bench, again, even if you're solo and you don't want to hire or subcontract, and how to effectively set this up. So, with that, let's talk more about why have this virtual talent bench. And there are really 2 specific reasons. There are 2 specific reasons with whatever direction you want to take. Again, you might have the goal of growing into a boutique agency or a micro agency or a micro firm, that kind of thing. You might have the goal of building out a small business, or you might really truly want to stay solo, or you may not be sure. It doesn't matter which of those goals you have. It's still important to build this virtual talent bench. And so I'll tell you why. The first reason, like I said, is probably obvious. It gives you options when you are selling work and delivering work. You've got this bank of resources that you could call upon, see if they've got availability, pull them in as you need to so that you can complete the work on time. If you've signed up, for work and you realize, oh, I bit off more than I can chew, being able to pull in this virtual talent bench to help you can be very valuable use of this type of a virtual talent bench. It gives you options when you're proposing work and you know that you need support up front, you can bring in those types of subcontractors from your virtual talent bench. Or perhaps you don't have a specific skill that you need in order to deliver the work, or you have the skill and you just don't want to do that type of work. So it gives you these types of options. The other option that a virtual talent bench gives you when you're selling and delivering work is that you may not have enough capacity. And so it gives you options to refer out to another firm. So you may not want to oversee the work. You may not want to be involved at any level in the work, but through your virtual talent bench, you can say to that client that you're talking to, look, I don't have time right now. So we can either wait for a few months until I have availability, or I can recommend, my friends over at XYZ because I know that they could get us started and then I can come back and help you with whatever type of work maybe is in progress at that point. That referral can be a paid type of referral where that firm that you're referring to gives you some kind of a finder's fee. And so again, you can set this up in a way where you are not having to oversee the work or even manage subs, where you're creating revenue for yourself without needing to do anything other than make an introduction. So you see here, the first reason why you would want to have a virtual talent bench is to give yourself all of these options options in the client acquisition phase of your business and also in the client delivery phase of your business. Having this type of option really frees you up to deliver work and make sure that you are delivering the quality of work that you want to be delivering and are not overworking or getting yourself into a challenge because of it. So there's that. That is the first reason. The second one that's surprising, that might surprise you here as we're talking about it, a reason to have a virtual talent bench, and you may never even need to engage the virtual talent bench. But the reason why you still want to have it is that it helps you to unblock your lead generation. It helps you to unblock your lead, being consistent with your lead generation. So let me get more specific about this. The first reason, which is giving yourself a lot of flexibility about how to deliver project work or even refer it out to another firm. And then we have the second reason, which is the mere presence of a virtual talent bench in your business will help you to unlock your lead generation. So let's talk more about what that means. One of the main reasons I see consultants having a dry pipeline is because they are thinking they don't have availability to take on another project. You may be in this same boat. You go out, you land a project, it basically requires all of your attention from a client delivery perspective and leaves you no room to take on another project. And so your head's down working on that engagement. You're thinking, I don't have time. Even if I landed a new client, I wouldn't have time to take them on. And so I'm going to put my lead generation to the side for right now. I'll pick it back up when I know this project is coming toward an end, and then I'll get the next client, basically. This is a very common scenario that most consultants are using to manage their business. And you're likely in this place or have been in this place in the past where your head's down working on an engagement. You know you couldn't even take on another client if you landed one. And so you suspend all of your lead generation activities until you feel like I think this contract may be coming to an end. I better look at my lead generation. A lot of times that even happens when the project ends and you come up for air and you think, okay, now I have time to work on lead gen and I do have capacity if I land a project. And by then it's way too late. It usually takes a month or two to build up a pipeline, sometimes even longer. And so waiting like that and taking these pauses is incredibly impactful to your business goals and to your growth and to you hitting your revenue numbers that you've set. And we've talked about this before, right? If you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me talking about this a lot. But today I want to share with you one of the techniques for you to avoid this dynamic, this on or off switch that you've got on your lead gen, and keep a consistent, steady, doesn't have to be, off the chart type of a lead gen. It's just a consistent, steady lead generation process is by having a virtual bench in place. When you have a virtual bench in place, it basically eliminates that excuse that, well, even if I land a new client, I don't have capacity to take them on. When that excuse goes away, you know what? I can always be landing different client engagements. And a lot of times they end up starting later than the client said they would, and I would be able to take it on anyway. But even if that's not the case and the client wants to start immediately, it's not a problem because I have this virtual bench in place. And so that is one of the main reasons why you want to create this virtual talent bench, even if you never use it, because it gives you that catch, that safety net to say, it's okay to be creating leads and filling my pipeline in a slow and steady way all of the time as part of one of my key core business practices. Because even if I land a client and I don't have the capacity, I have a solution for that. I can refer out to someone to take on the work entirely. I could pull in subs that they can get things started and then I can come in when I've got more capacity. I can bring in, a team to do one thing and then I do another part of the work. Whatever it is, however you end up structuring it, having this virtual bench as your safety net will take away that excuse for you that seems so logical, but it's truly an excuse that you don't have the capacity. So you shouldn't, there's no reason to be generating leads anyway. So that is such an important reason for you to start building out this virtual talent bench, even if you don't want to create a larger type of a firm. So hopefully that makes such good sense for you to understand what a virtual talent bench is at a high level and why have one. Why have one, even if you never end up engaging them? Let's transition now into the 5 components of a successful virtual bench strategy for your independent consulting business. So those 5 components of a successful virtual bench strategy are: number 1, get really clear on what that desired skill mix might be. Think about, okay, to create a really thriving virtual bench, one that will help me to take away the excuses about suspending lead generation when I'm fully utilized. What kinds of resources and other companies would I want to have in this virtual talent bench? So think about that. What kind of complementary type of resources would be valuable to have in that talent bench? What type of overlapping skills might be valuable in that talent bench? So people who do similar things to what you do. What do they call it? Co-opetition. I think I might have butchered that, but you see what I'm saying? It's kind of a combination of a little bit of competition and also collaboration. Sometimes you might want to have some overlap, depending on the scenario. So think about, what is my desired skill mix? What would I want this virtual talent bench to look like, ideally? Knowing the type of work you want to be doing, knowing the type of work you want to have in your pipeline, knowing the type of work you don't want to do so that you can get someone else to do it. And so that you're not stuck doing that type of work because it's the only thing that's coming to you. Really think about and get clear about what that desired virtual bench looks like. That's the first component of that successful strategy. The second component of your successful virtual bench strategy is to define your selection criteria. So get really clear. You're not hiring these people. You're not hiring or engaging or creating a contract even with these firms that might fit your desired skill mix. But really do think about what would your selection criteria be? What qualities do they need to have? What values do they need to have so that they align with what you do? And so you're not worried about recommending them or referring them or engaging them. What capabilities do they need to demonstrate to be on your virtual talent bench? Get really clear about that. Write it down. Write it down. This isn't just in your head. Write down the desired skill mix, write down the selection criteria. It's almost as if you're creating a hiring plan. We're just not hiring anyone. You've done that before, most likely in the past. So think about it in that way. And we're just not hiring them. We're just thinking about, okay, if I'm building out this ideal organization that has a deep bench of expertise, what do I want that to look like? And then the third component of a successful virtual bench strategy is getting clear on the engagement model you want to leverage for this virtual bench. So that looks like in what scenarios would you bring someone on as a sub? So you generate this one type of lead or this one type of potential client, and you can't fulfill all of the work or you don't want to fulfill all of the work. In what scenario would you bring someone on as a sub? In what scenario would you bring someone on as more of a referral agreement? So not bringing them on, but recommending or referring that potential client to another organization or another individual. And in what scenarios might it just be a simple introduction where there's not even a referral fee back to you? It's just, you know what, I think I'm just going to make an introduction here for whatever reason. So get really clear on what that engagement model is for your virtual bench. Based on the scenario, another arrangement may be more of a teaming type scenario, right? Where you're working alongside another individual. They're not under your umbrella, but you're working together to deliver different components of a project. That's the third component, is getting clear on the engagement model for your virtual bench based on the different scenarios. And then the fourth component of a successful bench strategy is for you to identify these resources, build relationships with them, and nurture those relationships. Once you know exactly what that desired skill mix is and what your selection criteria would be, then start filling in the boxes. Start thinking about, who are the different people I already know, or who do I know who knows someone that would fit this criteria, and start filling in the boxes of your virtual talent bench. Make it part of your regular routine. Which leads me to the fifth component of your successful virtual bench strategy, and that is to treat this virtual bench as its own pipeline. So think about your pipeline of prospective clients and having a complementary pipeline of your virtual talent bench. And having both of those in place creates this equilibrium that we've been talking about today. So you feel comfortable filling up your pipeline of potential clients, even if you're fully utilized right now, knowing that you've got kind of equal amounts of resources and options on the virtual talent bench side of your business. And it creates that kind of equilibrium for yourself so that, again, you're able to overcome that common cap that we put on ourselves as it relates to lead generation. I don't have capabilities, so I'm not going to do it. And then you create this feast or famine cycle. So those are the 5 components of a successful virtual bench strategy. Just to recap them, you want to know what your desired skill mix is. You want to define your selection criteria. You want to get clear on your engagement model. You want to start filling in the boxes by building and nurturing relationships with people that meet that desired skill set and selection criteria, or companies that meet that criteria. And then finally, treat your virtual bench as its own pipeline. So be doing the same types of consistent activities to create at the same time in parallel both a client pipeline, potential client pipeline, and also a virtual talent bench pipeline. You may never need to engage that virtual talent bench pipeline But as I've emphasized in this episode, the mere presence of it in your business will help to unleash your ability to do lead gen more consistently and not create the start and stopping dynamic that's so common. All right. So let's wrap up today's episode by I will share with you those steps to get started with implementing this virtual bench strategy in your business. There are three things you want to do to get started. Number one, you want to identify where the lack of a virtual bench is impacting your business. I will give you a head start because here, let me take a step back. You don't want to just go do this because I told you to. I mean, you could. It is important. That's why we're doing this episode. But you really want to say, okay, why, if I don't have a virtual bench right now, which it's likely you don't, most consultants don't, without a virtual bench, what is happening in your business? Get really clear, get specific, and look at it in two ways. This is a head start I wanted to give you. Look at it in two ways. Because you do not yet have a virtual talent bench, how is it impacting the way you're thinking about your business and your business goals? What's possible in your business? Without a virtual talent bench, it is likely you could be feeling capped. You could be feeling constrained. You could be feeling small. And as a result, you're not pursuing all of the type of work that you're capable of delivering. So, this lack of a virtual talent bench, really think about and get clear for yourself on how this could be impacting the way you're thinking about your business. And then also, another way to look at this is how is the lack of a virtual talent bench impacting the value of your pipeline? Is your pipeline empty? Is your pipeline ignored? Is your pipeline so much smaller than you know you need it to be in order to hit your financial goals and the quality of type of work goals that you've got? Those are some very specific places to start when you're thinking about that first step I gave you, identifying where the lack of a virtual bench is impacting your business and getting very, very specific about that. I don't have a virtual talent bench, and so therefore I'm thinking in this way, and my pipeline looks like this. That was the first step to get started implementing this strategy. The second step to get started implementing this virtual talent bench strategy is for you to set a specific goal for your virtual talent bench. Set a specific goal. It might be that your goal is to build out those 5 components of the successful virtual talent bench that I shared with you a moment ago in the next quarter. Or your goal might be, you know what, I just want to identify and find the first 3 most important resources in my virtual talent bench design that I created. Set a specific goal for yourself. Don't just put it on your list and say, I need a virtual talent bench because Melisa said I did. I'll get to that. No, set a specific goal. It could even be 1. I'm going to start with 1. I know that I would love to find a resource who does X, Y, and Z, or a company who has resources who do X, Y, and Z. I'll give you a really good example. A lot of clients who do a lot of data analysis, data crunching, and they've done it for years. They know how to do it in the back, while they sleep, but they're just not wanting to do it anymore. For those clients, finding a company or another resource who can do that kind of data crunching to give you at least a rough draft, a starting point, so you're not having to take all of that on your own. That gives you an example. So those are some ideas that you could leverage to do the second step I gave you. Set a goal for your virtual talent bench strategy. And then the third step to get started with your virtual talent bench strategy is to add this virtual bench to your business owner routine. Like I was saying a minute ago, this is an important second pipeline that is commonly overlooked by consultants. And it's really important to keep your business in equilibrium. You're able to create a thriving client pipeline because you have the equal set of resources available at the ready to satisfy that any type of work that's coming in. And again, it helps to take away that cap that we put on ourselves because we think, oh, I don't have capacity, so therefore I'm not going to worry about lead gen right now. So this third step to get started with your virtual bench strategy is to add this concept to your business owner routine. prioritize it, make it happen, just like your lead gen process on the client side. So to recap, we have the 3 steps to get started with this, implementing this virtual talent bench strategy. Number 1, identify where the lack of a virtual bench is impacting your business. Number 2, set a goal for starting to build your virtual bench or advancing your virtual bench if you already have one. And then number 3, add this to your business routine and prioritize it and make it happen. So that's what I have for you today. Don't forget to go take that independent consultant scalability assessment. It is at icscorecard.com. The 2 letters IC for independent consultant, the word scorecard.com. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.